Section 211 is the firearms transfers. This is House Resolution 8, the bipartisan background checks of 2019. It was passed by the House, died in the Senate. And when it comes to universal background checks, according to a March 2021 poll, 84% of voters, including 77% of Republicans, support universal background checks. And so what this bill would do is prohibit a firearm transfer between private parties unless either one, a licensed gun dealer, manufacturer, or importer first takes possession of the firearm to conduct a background check, or the transfer is exempt. And there's a half a dozen reasons that are written into the law that would make it exempt. And so I will, once again, take a look at these. The Background Checks Act the background checks would not be required. Obviously, people can still do them, but they wouldn't be required under this law. In the case of law enforcement, armed forces acting within the course and scope of their official duties. A transfer that's a gift between family members, spouses, domestic partners, grandparents, as long as there's no reason to believe that the firearm is going to be used in a crime or that the other person would be prohibited from possessing firearms. So parents can still hand down guns to their kids as long as there's no reason, they don't know of any reason why they shouldn't. Transfers from states at death, temporary transfers. This is like exigent circumstances. So if somebody is in need of a firearm to prevent imminent death, great bodily harm from domestic violence or stalking or anything like that, then there's an exemption. You can give them a gun to protect themselves. There's transfers approved by the Attorney General or a temporary transfer for a couple of different reasons. So you can give somebody a gun at a shooting range for the purpose of target shooting. You can loan someone a gun to take hunting, as long as you have no reason to believe that they're going to do anything illegal with it and that they're going to be complying with the law and permit requirements for hunting, trapping, whatever. The other exemption is just while you're in the presence of the transferor. So you can, as long as you're with that person, it's exempt from the background checks. So that is what the exemptions are. Once again, like, what is the symptom that we're trying to address here? We said that abortions have gone down over the last few decades, but gun deaths, on the other hand, they have gone up. In 2020, we hit an all-time high of more than 45,000 people, like all ages, all races, all genders. 45,000 people lost their lives to gun deaths in 2020. And so, like abortion, this legislative package will address it in a number of ways to bring those numbers down. First, 57% of those gun deaths were suicides. And so what causes deaths of despair? Things like financial problems, drug abuse, depression, difficulties with relationships. Poverty exacerbates all of those conditions. And so by establishing a firm economic floor with universal basic income, we're going to improve America's overall mental health and reduce suicides. A small but highly visible portion of gun deaths comes from mass shootings. And sadly, this is not a new phenomenon in America. We've been here before. 80 years ago, during the last iteration of the Phoenix cycle, we had a problem with mass shootings. The threads of society were becoming unraveled because of rampant wealth inequality and economic injustice. And Sebastian Younger wrote a book called Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging. And he wrote, quote, "The first time that the United States suffered a wave of rampage shootings was during the 1930s, when society had been severely stressed and fractured by the Great Depression." Now, we have a lot of those same stresses and fractures again today. And that's, unfortunately, it's kind of easy to forget after a couple of years of the pandemic, but mass shootings were in the news constantly. And we can address some of these problems through universal basic income, plus a value-added tax to address wealth inequality, and try to patch the fraying fabric of our societal bonds. It was 4 years ago this week that there was a mass shooting in Parkland, Florida. And Matt Taibbi, he wrote a piece in Rolling Stone after it called, "If we want the kids to stop killing, the adults have to stop too." And I'll put a link in the description below. And he wrote, "Deep-seated cultural ideas about the virtue of military supremacy and the political efficacy of violence," he said, were related to the rise in mass shootings. And he concluded that this madness won't stop until we stop believing that killing makes us strong, or that we can kill without guilt or consequence just by being precise. What beliefs like that actually make us is insane and damaged, and it's no surprise that our kids too are beginning to become collateral damage. Look, military glorification is one of the causes of gun violence in our country. By striving to end the endless wars, by reducing military spending in this legislative package, by reducing that glorification of violence, and at the same time demonstrating that reasonable, rational adults can work out their differences peacefully, we can address this mindset, we can address these core issues, and we can bring down the gun deaths. So that is a goal that all of us, I think, support. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my testimony for Section 211. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
So this is a federal piece of legislation. Would this bar states or localities from instituting additional legislation related to guns or abortions, for that matter?
No, this would not change any of that. So if they're currently able to do that, they could still do it. The next two are going to be real quick. Section 212 is just some technical and conforming amendments, updates to references in the United States Code to the firearms transfer sections. That's it. And that concludes my testimony for Section 212. Section 213, no firearm registry authorized. It does exactly what it says. It addresses the objection that universal background checks equal a national firearm registry. It's two parts. A1 says explicitly no, it does not authorize the establishment directly or indirectly of a national firearms registry. And then A2 says that states' rights still apply here. States have the authority to, they aren't prohibited from creating their own by this section. And that concludes my testimony for Section 213.